Chapter 1. The portal trembles, the void was silent, too silent. Beyond the shattered rim of the alien world of Kael'thar, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The planet's once glorious surface was now a scarred battlefield, its oceans boiled into vapor, its cities reduced to jagged ruins. Above it, the siege continued. A vast armada of hostile warships, black as obsidian, encircled the dying sphere like vultures around carrion. Their weapons pulsed with malignant energy, each strike tearing deeper into the planet's crust. The defenders, Kael'thar's proud crystalline warriors, were faltering, their fleets dwindling to fragments, their voices echoing despair across the comnet. And then the portal began to stir. At first it was only a ripple in the fabric of hyperspace, a distortion that shimmered faintly against the backdrop of stars. The enemy commanders noticed it immediately. Their sensors screamed warnings, their tactical screens filled with cascading anomalies. The distortion grew, swelling into a vortex of impossible geometry, a wound in reality itself. The Kael'thari survivors, battered and broken, turned their gaze upward. Hope flickered in their crystalline eyes for the first time in months. The portal trembled. It was not the arrival of a single ship, nor a fleet. It was something far greater, something that would alter the balance of the galaxy forever. The hyperspace wound expanded until it dwarfed the planet below. Energy arcs lashed outward, striking enemy ships and vaporizing them instantly. The black-armored invaders scrambled to reposition, their formations breaking apart in panic. The Kael'thari defenders whispered across their comms. Could it be? Had the humans answered their desperate call? Then the first silhouette emerged. A colossal dreadnought, its hull bristling with rail cannons, plasma lances, and missile silos, burst through the portal like a leviathan breaching the ocean's surface. Its sheer size eclipsed the enemy cruisers, its armored plating gleaming with the insignia of the Alliance of Sol Federation ASF. The dreadnought's engines roared, shaking the void itself, and behind it another, and another, and another. The portal vomited forth ships in an endless cascade, 10, 50, 100, 1,000. The numbers climbed beyond comprehension. Each vessel was a fortress of steel and firepower, each bristling with weapons designed to annihilate entire fleets. The Kael'thari gasped as the count rose higher still. The enemy commanders screamed orders, but their voices were drowned out by the thunder of arrival. 10,000 human dreadnoughts burst through hyperspace. The void was no longer silent. It was alive with the roar of engines, the crackle of weapons charging, the thunderous chorus of war machines preparing for battle. The ASF fleet spread across the stars like a tidal wave, their formations precise, their discipline absolute. Each dreadnought locked into position, their targeting systems painting the enemy ships with cold, merciless precision. The Kael'thari defenders wept, not in sorrow but in awe. Salvation had come, clad in steel and fire. The enemy armada faltered. Their commanders, once arrogant, now faced the impossible. 10,000 dreadnoughts, each capable of leveling a continent, now stood between them and their prey. The siege was broken before the battle had even begun. Yet the humans did not fire immediately. They held their positions, their weapons humming with restrained fury, waiting for the signal. On the flagship of the ASF fleet, Admiral Seraphine Kael stood at the command deck, her eyes fixed on the burning world below. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of destiny as she spoke to her officers. Kael'thar will not fall. Today, humanity proves its oath. Ready all batteries. Target the invaders. And when the order comes, unleash hell. The portal behind them still pulsed, its energy echoing across the void, a reminder of the impossible feat humanity had achieved. 10,000 dreadnoughts summoned across hyperspace, united under one banner. The galaxy would remember this moment, the enemy would fear it, and the Kael'thari would never forget the day humanity arrived, not as conquerors but as saviors. The silence shattered as the first volley of human firepower lit the stars. The war had begun. Would you like me to make Chapter 2 even more intense, focusing on the first clash between the ASF dreadnoughts and the enemy armada, with vivid battle detail and escalating suspense? Chapter 2, The first clash, the void trembled as the Kelthari homeworld burned beneath the siege. The enemy armada, vast and merciless, had encircled the planet like a tightening noose. Their warships, sleek, jagged constructs of alien engineering, glimmered with the cold light of annihilation. They had expected victory, swift and absolute. But now before them stood the impossible, 10,000 human dreadnoughts, each a titan of war, each bristling with enough firepower to shatter fleets. The silence after the first volley was unbearable. The enemy ships reeled, shields flaring, hulls cracking under the sudden storm of plasma and railgun fire. Yet they did not break. They surged forward, desperate to prove that numbers and arrogance could withstand the fury of humanity. Their formations twisted into attack spirals, weapons igniting in synchronized bursts. The void became a storm of light. Admiral Seraphine Kale stood unmoving on the ASF flagship, her gaze locked on the tactical display. Every heartbeat was a drum of tension. She knew the enemy would not retreat. They would fight to the last, for pride, for conquest, for the illusion of inevitability. Her officers awaited her command, their hands hovering over controls that could unleash devastation on a scale unseen in galactic history. "Hold formation," she ordered, her voice steady, cutting through the chaos. "Let them come. Let them believe they can break us." The enemy armada surged. Thousands of warships screamed across the void, their weapons vomiting fire. The Kelthari defenders, battered and bloodied, watched in awe as the human dreadnoughts absorbed the storm. Shields rippled, hulls groaned, but the ASF line did not falter. 10,000 ships stood as one, their unity a wall of steel and defiance. Then the counterstrike came. The ASF dreadnoughts unleashed their fury in perfect synchrony. Railguns fired in thunderous salvos, spears of molten metal tearing through enemy hulls. Plasma batteries erupted, painting the void with rivers of fire. Missile swarms streaked across the stars, weaving through the chaos to strike with surgical precision. Entire enemy squadrons vanished in bursts of light, their remains scattering like ash in the wind. The Kelthari gasped, their voices trembling with disbelief. The humans did not fight like conquerors, they fought like guardians, every volley a promise kept, every maneuver a shield raised against annihilation. The enemy armada, once so certain of victory, now found itself drowning in the tide of human wrath. But the battle was far from decided. The enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons, surged forward. Its cannons roared, tearing through the void with beams of energy that could slice mountains in half. It targeted the ASF vanguard, determined to shatter the human line. Admiral Kale's eyes narrowed as the display lit with warnings. The enemy's flagship was no ordinary vessel. It was a leviathan, a weapon forged to break civilizations. "Bring the dreadnought phalanx forward," she commanded. "Lock shields, focus fire." The ASF dreadnoughts shifted, their formations tightening into a wall of overlapping shields. The enemy's beams struck, but the phalanx held. Energy rippled across the barrier, but it did not break. Then, in unison, the dreadnoughts returned fire. Thousands of railguns, thousands of plasma batteries, thousands of missiles, all converged on the Leviathan. The void erupted in a storm of destruction. The enemy flagship staggered, its shields collapsing, its hull cracking under the relentless assault. Yet it did not fall. It roared back, unleashing a wave of drones, swarms of smaller vessels designed to overwhelm defenses. The ASF dreadnoughts pivoted, their point defense systems igniting, shredding the swarm in a storm of fire. But the tension mounted. The enemy was relentless, and the battle was only beginning. On the surface of Kael'thar, the defenders watched the heavens burn. The skies were alive with fire, the horizon trembling with the echoes of war. They knew their fate hung in the balance. If the humans faltered, the world would fall. If the dreadnoughts broke, the Kelthari would be extinguished. Admiral Kale's voice cut through the storm, calm and resolute. "Humanity does not falter. Humanity does not break. Today we stand as one. Today we remind the galaxy why we endure." The dreadnoughts surged forward, their engines roaring, their weapons blazing. The void became a battlefield of titans, every moment a clash of destiny. The enemy armada fought with desperation, but the ASF fleet fought with purpose. And in that purpose lay the seed of victory. The first clash had begun. The galaxy held its breath. Would you like Chapter 3 to escalate into the boarding operations and infiltration missions, where human strike teams storm enemy flagships in brutal close-quarters combat, raising the tension even further? Chapter 3. The Breach the Void trembled as the Leviathan flagship reeled under the relentless barrage, its hull scarred but unbroken. Admiral Kale's eyes flicked across the tactical display, shields failing, but the beast still clawed forward. It was not enough to batter it from afar. The Dreadnoughts could hold the line, but the flagship's command core had to be silenced. Humanity's wrath had to reach inside the monster. "Prepare boarding strike teams," Kale ordered, her voice steady despite the storm. "We cut the Serpent's head." Across the fleet, strike cruisers detached from the phalanx, their hulls bristling with breaching pods. Inside, armored Marines checked weapons, sealed helmets, and whispered oaths. They were the blade behind the shield. Their mission was suicide wrapped in steel. To storm the enemy flagship was to step into the maw of annihilation. Yet none faltered. The hyperspace portal still burned behind them, its edges shimmering with unstable energy. More human dreadnoughts poured through, reinforcing the line, but Kale knew the enemy's strategy. Stall the ASF long enough for reinforcements to arrive from the dark sectors. If the flagship endured, the tide could turn. Humanity's gamble was razor-thin. The strike cruisers accelerated, weaving through the chaos of drones and plasma fire. ASF dreadnoughts opened corridors with precision bombardments, carving paths through the swarm. Pods launched, hundreds of them streaking across the void like spears of light. The Leviathan's point defense cannons spat fury, shredding dozens, but too many slipped through. They slammed into the flagship's hull, magnetic clamps biting deep, cutting torches igniting. Inside the pods, silence reigned. Then the walls split open, and humanity surged into the beast. The corridors of the Leviathan were a nightmare of alien architecture, organic metal walls pulsing with energy, shadows alive with movement. The enemy had prepared for this. Automated turrets unfolded from the ceiling, shrieking drones poured from vents, and armored alien warriors charged with blades that shimmered like liquid fire. The clash was immediate, brutal, and deafening. ASF Marines fought with disciplined ferocity. Rail carbines barked, shredding drones into molten fragments. Grenades detonated, collapsing turrets in showers of sparks. Close-quarters combat erupted, blades against powered gauntlets, alien shrieks against human war cries. Every corridor became a killing ground, every junction a graveyard. The flagship resisted like a living organism, its defenses adapting, its warriors unyielding. Captain Rin, leading Strike Team Alpha, carved forward through the chaos. His visor display flickered with warnings, but his voice was iron. Push to the command core. No hesitation, no retreat. They advanced step by step, leaving trails of destruction. Yet the deeper they went, the more the Leviathan revealed its horrors. Walls shifted, sealing passages. Gravity fluctuated, hurling Marines into ceilings. Biomechanical traps snapped shut, consuming soldiers in bursts of acid and flame. The flagship was not just a ship, it was a predator designed to devour intruders. Above, Admiral Kale watched the boarding telemetry with grim focus. Red icons blinked out, strike teams lost, pods destroyed. But green markers pressed forward, inching toward the core. She knew the cost. Every meter gained was bought with blood. Every corridor cleared was a sacrifice. Yet humanity endured. The enemy flagship retaliated, its main batteries igniting once more. Beams lanced through the void, hammering the ASF phalanx. Shields buckled, dreadnought hulls cracked. Kale's command ship shuddered under the impact, alarms screaming. She clenched her fists. The boarding teams had to succeed, there was no other path. "Hold the line," she whispered. "Buy them time." Deep inside the Leviathan, Strike Team Alpha reached the central chamber. It was vast, cathedral-like, filled with towering conduits and a pulsating core of energy. At its center stood the enemy commander, a towering figure clad in armor that shimmered with void light, eyes burning with alien fury. Around him, elite guards formed a circle, weapons raised. Captain Rin's breath caught. This was the heart. This was the serpent's head. "Break them," he growled. The chamber erupted in chaos. ASF Marines hurled themselves into the fray, railguns blazing, blades clashing. The alien commander moved like a storm, cutting down soldiers with arcs of energy. His voice thundered, a language of hate and defiance. Yet humanity did not yield. They fought with desperation, with rage, with the knowledge that the galaxy's fate hung on this moment. Rin charged, his gauntlet blade igniting. He met the commander head-on, steel against voidlight, fury against fury. Sparks filled the chamber, the clash echoing like thunder. Around them, Marines and aliens fell, the floor slick with blood and fire. The core pulsed, threatening to overload, threatening to consume them all. In orbit, Admiral Kale's sensors flared. The Leviathan's energy signature spiked. Boarding teams had reached the command core. She leaned forward, her voice a whisper of steel. "End it." The galaxy held its breath. The battle for the Leviathan's heart had begun. Would you like Chapter 4 to dive into the duel between Captain Rin and the alien commander, escalating into a catastrophic core overload that threatens to annihilate both fleets? Chapter 4. The core trembles, the chamber shook, as Captain Rin's blade clashed against the alien commander's void-light weapon. Each strike sent shockwaves through the cathedral-like hall, rattling conduits and making the pulsating core flare brighter, as though it too felt the violence. Sparks cascaded like meteors, illuminating the carnage around them. Marines screaming, alien guards shrieking, the floor slick with blood and molten steel. The alien commander was relentless. His armor shimmered with a spectral glow, absorbing kinetic blasts and deflecting railgun fire. He moved with terrifying precision, every swing of his weapon cutting through squads as if they were paper. His voice was a guttural roar, a language that seemed to warp the air itself, vibrating in the bones of every soldier who heard it. Rin pressed forward, his gauntlet blade burning with plasma fire. He ducked under a sweeping strike, countered with a slash that carved a glowing scar across the commander's chest plate. The alien staggered but did not fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound like grinding stone, and retaliated with a surge of void light that hurled Rin across the chamber. The Marines rallied, unleashing a storm of firepower. Railgun rounds hammered the commander's guards, shredding their armor, but the alien leader raised his hand. A wave of energy erupted outward, vaporizing half a squad in an instant. The survivors screamed but did not falter. Humanity's fury was unyielding. Above, Admiral Kale's command ship trembled under another barrage from the Leviathan's external batteries. Hull plating buckled, alarms shrieked, and the Dreadnoughts' shields flickered dangerously close to collapse. Kale's knuckles whitened as she gripped the command rail. She could see the energy spike from the core. Her boarding teams were locked in combat with the enemy commander. "Push them," she whispered, her voice trembling with restrained desperation. "Push them to the brink." Inside the chamber, the core pulsed violently, its rhythm accelerating. The conduits feeding it glowed white-hot, threatening to rupture. The alien commander's laughter faltered as he glanced at the unstable energy. His fury redoubled, he knew the danger. If the core overloaded, it would annihilate both fleets in orbit. Rin rose, staggering, blood dripping from a gash across his brow. He locked eyes with the commander. "You're afraid," he spat, his voice hoarse but defiant. "You know this ends with us." The alien roared, charging forward. Their blades collided again, the impact shaking the chamber like thunder. Around them, Marines fought desperately, holding back the guards, buying Rin seconds at a time. Every heartbeat was a sacrifice. Every breath was borrowed. The core screamed, a sound not of machinery but of something alive, something ancient. Its light expanded, filling the chamber with blinding brilliance. Conduits snapped, spraying molten plasma. The floor cracked, fissures glowing with raw energy. Admiral Kale's sensors flared red. The Leviathan's energy signature was spiraling out of control. Her officers shouted warnings, but she silenced them with a raised hand. Her gaze was locked on the tactical display, on the blinking green icons of her boarding teams. "They're still fighting," she said softly. "They're still holding." Back in the chamber, Rin and the commander locked blades once more. The alien strength was monstrous, but Rin fought with something deeper: rage, desperation, the weight of humanity's survival. He twisted his blade, forcing the commander back, sparks raining down like fire. The core's pulse reached a crescendo. The chamber shook violently, conduits exploding, debris raining from the ceiling. Marines screamed as the floor split open, swallowing soldiers into the abyss below. Rin roared, driving his blade into the commander's chest. The alien staggered, void light flickering, armor cracking. But instead of falling, he seized Rin's arm, pulling him closer. Their faces were inches apart, eyes burning with hatred. "If I fall," the commander hissed, his voice like grinding stone, "we all burn." The core erupted, a blinding surge of energy that consumed the chamber in white fire. Above, Admiral Kale's command ship was struck by the shockwave. Shields shattered, hull plating peeled away, and dreadnoughts across the fleet reeled under the impact. The Leviathan's energy signature spiked beyond containment. Kale's breath caught. The core was going critical, and in that instant the galaxy teetered on the edge of annihilation. Chapter 4 ends with the core's overload imminent, the duel unresolved, and both fleets staring into the abyss of mutual destruction. The tension is absolute. The next heartbeat could decide whether humanity and the alien world survive or vanish in fire. Chapter 5. The shattered veil. The chamber was gone, or perhaps it had never truly existed, only a fragile construct wrapped around the core's impossible energy. When the eruption came, reality itself seemed to tear. Rin felt his body flung into a void of light and shadow, his blade still locked in the alien commander's chest. The scream of the core was no longer sound but vibration in the marrow of existence, a resonance that threatened to unmake him atom by atom. Above, Admiral Kale's fleet staggered. 10,000 dreadnoughts, each a fortress of steel and fury, reeled as hyperspace itself rippled like a wounded beast. The shockwave had not merely struck their shields, it had clawed at the fabric of the portal through which they had come. The hyperspace aperture flickered, unstable, its edges fraying into jagged arcs of lightning that threatened to collapse inward. If it did, the fleet would be trapped, crushed between dimensions, annihilated without trace. Kale's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. "Stabilize the aperture. Divert all auxiliary power to the portal anchors." Her officers scrambled, hands flying across consoles, but the readings were merciless. The Leviathan's core was unraveling faster than their stabilizers could compensate. Every second brought them closer to the abyss. On the alien world below, the defenders watched the sky split open. The dreadnoughts, humanity's last gamble, were silhouettes against a storm of fire. Alien civilians huddled in shattered cities, their eyes reflecting both terror and hope. They had prayed for salvation, but now salvation itself seemed to be burning. Rin's vision cleared in fragments. He was standing, or floating, on a fractured plane of obsidian, suspended in a void where stars bled into rivers of light. The alien commander still clutched his arm, void light leaking from the wound in his chest. Yet the commander did not fall. His voice was a whisper that echoed across infinity. "You see it now," he rasped. "The veil between worlds, the core was never a weapon, it was a gate, and you have torn it open." Rin's heart hammered. He could feel the truth in the words. The eruption had not destroyed the core, it had triggered something older, deeper. A gateway, vast and terrible, was yawning wide. Through it, shapes moved, colossal silhouettes, serpentine and winged, their forms too immense to comprehend. Not ships, not armies, something else, something ancient. The commander's grip tightened. "If they cross, neither your kind nor mine will survive." On the flagship, Kale's sensors screamed warnings. New signatures were emerging from the rift, massive, unclassified, their energy readings dwarfing even the Leviathan. Officers shouted, panic rising, but Kale's gaze remained locked on the tactical display, her jaw clenched. "Contact boarding teams," she ordered. "I need eyes inside that chamber. Find Rin, find out what's happening." But the comm channels were static, drowned in the storm. The boarding teams were cut off, their signals lost in the fracture of reality. Kale's hand trembled for the first time. She had led fleets into impossible battles, faced annihilation without flinching, but this was different. This was not war. This was something beyond war. Rin staggered, forcing his blade deeper into the commander's chest. "Then help me stop it," he snarled, "or die knowing you doomed us all." The commander's eyes burned with hatred and something else. Resignation. Slowly, he released Rin's arm, void light spilling from his wound like smoke. "There is no stopping it," he whispered. "Only choosing who is consumed first." The void trembled. One of the colossal shapes pressed closer, its outline resolving into a vast, skeletal construct, a creature of bone and shadow. Its maw opened, and the sound that emerged was not a roar but a chorus of voices, countless and eternal. Rin felt his knees buckle. His mind screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Kale's fleet braced as the first of the entities breached the rift. Sensors failed to classify it. Every attempt returned corrupted data, as if the creature's existence defied logic. Dreadnoughts opened fire, beams of plasma and railgun slugs streaking into the void. The creature absorbed them, its body rippling like water, and then it turned its gaze upon the fleet. Kale's breath caught. She had seen enemies, monsters, leviathans, but never something that looked back at her with intelligence older than stars. For the first time, she wondered if humanity's arrival had not been salvation but intrusion. The chamber cracked further, shards of obsidian falling into the abyss. Rin raised his blade, his body trembling, his mind fraying. The commander collapsed to his knees, void light dimming. "You fight shadows with steel," he murmured. "But shadows are endless." Rin's grip tightened. "Then I'll fight until there's nothing left." The void shuddered. The gateway widened, and from its depths more shapes emerged, an army not of flesh or machine, but of nightmares given form. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Above, Kale's fleet prepared for the impossible. 10,000 dreadnoughts aligned, their weapons charging, their crews whispering prayers. The hyperspace portal flickered, threatening collapse. The alien world below trembled, its people staring upward at salvation and damnation entwined. Kale's voice rang across the fleet, steady and unyielding. "We hold the line. Humanity does not retreat, not now, not ever." And as the first of the ancient entities surged forward, the dreadnoughts unleashed their fury. The battle for existence had begun. End of Chapter 5. Would you like me to push Chapter 6 into even darker territory, where the dreadnoughts clash with these ancient entities, and the alien commander's dying words reveal a deeper conspiracy? Chapter 6. The shattering silence. The void was no longer silent. It pulsed, a living wound in the fabric of reality, each beat echoing through the hulls of the dreadnoughts like a heartbeat from something too vast to comprehend. Kale's fleet had unleashed its fury, but the entities did not fall. They bent, twisted, absorbed, and reformed, as though the weapons of humanity were nothing more than sparks against an ocean. The alien world below trembled. Cities carved into crystalline spires flickered with defensive shields, their people staring upward in terror. They had prayed for salvation, and salvation had come, but salvation bled. Kale's command deck was a storm of voices. Tactical officers screamed coordinates, engineers reported failing reactor stabilizers, and comms channels filled with the cries of captains watching their ships torn apart by shadows. Kale stood unmoving, her eyes locked on the rift. She knew the battle was not about victory, it was about time. "Hold formation," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Every second we buy is a second the world below survives." But even as she spoke, the entities shifted. The skeletal leviathan that had first emerged now split into dozens of fragments, each fragment a predator of impossible geometry. They swarmed, weaving through plasma fire, latching onto dreadnought hulls. One ship, Iron Resolve, was pierced clean through, its crew's final transmission a scream drowned in static. Far below, Rin staggered across the fractured chamber. The commander lay dying, void light leaking from his chest like smoke from a dying star. His words haunted Rin, only choosing who is consumed first. The obsidian walls cracked wider, revealing the abyss beyond. Rin's blade trembled in his grip. He could feel the entities pressing against his mind, whispering in voices that were not voices. They promised release. They promised eternity. They promised nothingness. But Rin remembered Kale's voice, steady and unyielding. Humanity does not retreat. He raised his blade again. Above, the dreadnoughts fought like gods. 10,000 ships, each a fortress of steel and fire, unleashed storms of annihilation. Railguns spat slugs the size of buildings. Plasma lances carved arcs of light across the void, and missile swarms detonated in blossoms of fury. The entities writhed, their forms collapsing and reforming, but for the first time, they faltered. Kale's eyes widened. "They can bleed," she whispered. The fleet roared. Crews cheered through blood and terror. Humanity had found a crack in the armor of eternity, but the victory was short-lived. The rift convulsed, expanding, and from its depths emerged something greater. Not a creature, but a construct, an edifice of shadow and bone, vast enough to eclipse the alien world below. Its presence silenced every voice, every scream, every prayer. The dreadnoughts faltered. Kale felt her throat tighten. This was not an enemy. This was inevitability. Rin's chamber shook as the construct emerged. The commander's eyes flickered open one last time. His voice was a rasp, but it carried weight beyond death. "They are not invaders," he whispered. "They are jailers, and the prison is us." Rin froze. The blade in his hand felt suddenly meaningless. Jailers, prison, his mind reeled, but there was no time to question. The abyss surged and the chamber collapsed. Kale's fleet braced as the construct turned its gaze upon them. Sensors failed, data streams corrupted, and every dreadnought system screamed warnings. The construct opened its maw not to devour, but to speak. The sound was not sound. It was thought. It was command. It was truth. "You are not saviors. You are trespassers. The world below is ours. The galaxy is ours. You are ours." Kale's breath caught. For the first time, she felt the weight of inevitability pressing against her soul, but she clenched her fists, her voice steady, her will unbroken. "Then you'll have to take us," she said, "one ship at a time." The dreadnoughts roared again, unleashing fire into the abyss. Humanity had chosen defiance, and the construct answered. The battle for existence deepened. The galaxy itself trembled. End of Chapter 6 / Chapter 7. The maw of silence, the construct's presence was not merely seen. It was felt, pressed into every neuron, every synapse, every trembling heartbeat across the fleet. 10,000 dreadnoughts, each a titan of war, suddenly seemed like fragile vessels adrift in a storm too vast to comprehend. Kale gripped the command rail, her knuckles white, as the construct's thought voice reverberated through her skull. "Trespassers, prisoners, ours." The words were not words, but inevitabilities carved into the marrow of existence. On the bridge of the iron resolve, her crew staggered. Some screamed, clawing at their ears, though no sound existed. Others fell silent, eyes glazed, their minds already claimed. Kale forced herself to stand tall, her voice cutting through the madness. "Lock fire on the core of that thing. If it bleeds, it dies." Her words were defiance incarnate, but the dreadnought systems flickered, screens dissolving into static. The construct's shadow was not merely physical, it was informational, a corruption that gnawed at code and thought alike. Above the alien world, the battle convulsed. Railgun slugs vanished mid-flight, swallowed by impossible geometries. Plasma lances bent, refracted, and returned upon their own ships. Missiles detonated prematurely, their guidance systems rewritten by whispers from the abyss. Yet humanity did not falter. 10,000 captains screamed orders. 10,000 crews fought against entropy itself. The dreadnoughts became more than ships, they became declarations. Rin, buried beneath collapsing stone and fire, clawed his way free. His blade was gone, his armor shattered, but his mind burned with Kale's words. Humanity does not retreat. He staggered into the ruins where the entities writhed like rivers of shadow. They recoiled from him, not from his strength, but from his refusal. The construct shifted. Its maw widened, not to consume, but to reveal. Within its hollow frame, Kale glimpsed something that froze her blood. A lattice of human faces, millions of them, suspended in translucent prisons of bone and light. Their eyes stared, unblinking, their mouths open in eternal screams. "Gods," whispered her helmsman. "They're us." Kale's throat tightened. The construct was not alien, it was a harvest, a prison built from humanity itself stretched across eons, binding souls into its architecture. The thought voice surged again. You are not saviors, you are continuations, you are fuel. Kale's rage ignited. Then burn on our fire. The dreadnoughts unleashed everything. Coordinated salvos of railgun fire hammered the construct's surface, plasma storms cascaded across its frame, and nuclear warheads detonated in blinding fury. For a heartbeat, the void itself seemed to fracture under the weight of humanity's defiance. And then, the construct bled, not blood, but light. A fissure tore across its surface, spilling radiance like molten stars. The imprisoned faces screamed, their voices merging into a chorus that shook the fleet. Kale's eyes widened. We can break it. But the construct answered with silence. A silence so profound it devoured sound, thought, and hope. Engines died, weapons froze, even hearts seemed to falter. The maw of silence had opened. Rin stumbled into the chamber's heart, where the entities writhed around a singular core, a shard of the construct itself, pulsing with stolen souls. He felt their whispers clawing at his mind, promising release, promising eternity. But he remembered Kale's voice. Humanity does not retreat. He reached out, his hand trembling, and seized the shard. Agony ripped through him, but he held fast. The entities shrieked, recoiling, their forms unraveling. Above, Kale's fleet saw the fissure widen. The construct convulsed, its silence cracking, its prison trembling. For the first time, inevitability faltered, and humanity pressed forward. The battle was no longer about survival. It was about breaking chains older than stars. The dreadnoughts roared, their firestorm renewed. Rin screamed, his body burning with the shard's fury. Kale stood unyielding, her voice carrying across the fleet. One ship at a time, one soul at a time, we will break you. The construct shuddered. The maw of silence trembled. The galaxy itself held its breath. End of Chapter 7, Chapter 8. The shard of unmaking the void trembled as if the stars themselves recoiled from what was unfolding. The fissure in the construct widened, spilling torrents of light that writhed like serpents across the battlefield. Every dreadnought's hull reflected the radiance, their armored surfaces gleaming like blades drawn against eternity. Yet beneath the brilliance lay horror. The imprisoned faces, millions upon millions, contorted in agony, their screams echoing across the comms in frequencies no human throat could produce. Kale gripped the command rail, her knuckles white. Hold formation, she ordered, though her voice cracked under the weight of what pressed against her mind. The maw of silence had not closed, it was expanding, its hunger stretching outward, devouring the very fabric of thought. Engines faltered again. Crew members staggered, clutching their heads as whispers slithered into their consciousness. You are fuel. You are continuation. You are nothing. But then Rin's voice cut through the static, weak, ragged, but defiant. I have the shard. The fleet erupted in gasps. Kale's heart lurched. The shard, the pulsing fragment of the construct's core, was in human hands. Yet its power was not a gift. It was venom. Rin staggered through the chamber, every step a war against annihilation. The shard burned in his grip, searing flesh, unraveling bone. His veins glowed with its light, his eyes bleeding radiance. Around him the entities shrieked, their forms collapsing into dust and shadow. But the shard whispered promises, release, eternity, become the silence. He clenched his jaw. No, I am human, I am alive. The chamber convulsed, walls of bone and light cracking. The imprisoned faces turned toward him, their screams shifting, no longer agony but pleading. They reached for him, their spectral hands clawing at the shard. Above, Kale's fleet saw the construct shudder. The fissure widened into a wound, spilling rivers of brilliance into the void. The maw of silence faltered, its grip loosening. Engines roared back to life, weapons flickered online. Kale's voice thundered across the comms. All ships strike now, break the wound open. The dreadnoughts surged forward. Railguns spat fire, plasma storms cascaded, nuclear detonations carved scars across the construct's surface. The void became a battlefield of suns, each explosion tearing deeper into the prison of souls. But the construct fought back. Tendrils of silence lashed out, striking ships, freezing them mid-battle. Entire dreadnoughts went dark, drifting lifelessly into the abyss. Crews screamed as their minds were ripped from their bodies, absorbed into the lattice of faces. Kale's ship shuddered under the assault. Her helmsman collapsed, his eyes glowing with stolen light. Kale seized the controls herself, forcing the dreadnought into the storm. "We are not fuel," she growled. "We are fire." Her ship's railguns unleashed a salvo that tore through the construct's surface, exposing a cavern of imprisoned souls. Their screams became a chorus of hope, a resonance that shook the maw itself. Rin fell to his knees, the shard burning through him. His flesh peeled away, replaced by light. He was becoming part of it, becoming silence. But he remembered Kale's voice, her defiance, her fire. He raised the shard high, screaming with every ounce of humanity left in him. One soul at a time, the shard cracked. Light spilled from it, not venom but liberation. The imprisoned faces surged forward, their chains snapping, their screams transforming into cries of freedom. The chamber collapsed, the entities dissolving into dust. Above, the fissure exploded outward. The construct convulsed, its prison unraveling. The maw of silence shrieked, its hunger recoiling. Kale's fleet pressed forward, their firestorm unrelenting. One ship at a time, one soul at a time. Humanity was breaking the chains, but victory was not yet theirs. From the heart of the construct, something stirred. A shadow deeper than silence, older than stars. It rose, vast and terrible, its form eclipsing the battlefield. The maw was not the construct, it was its guardian. And now it was awake, Kale's breath caught. Gods, the dreadnoughts faltered, their weapons dimming under the shadow's gaze. The liberated souls screamed, their freedom threatened once more. Rin collapsed, the shard shattered in his hands. His body was broken, his light fading. But his voice whispered across the comms, faint yet unyielding. "Kale, finish it." The galaxy trembled. The shadow loomed. Humanity stood at the edge of annihilation. And Kale raised her voice, defiant against eternity. "Then burn." End of Chapter 8 / Chapter 9. The maw unleashed. The shadow did not simply rise, it consumed. Stars dimmed as its vastness spread across the void, blotting out the battlefield in a curtain of living night. The liberated souls shrieked, their cries twisting into echoes of terror as the maw's gaze fell upon them. It was not a creature, not a machine. It was hunger incarnate, older than the galaxies themselves, a guardian forged from silence and despair. Kale's dreadnought trembled as the shadow's tendrils unfurled, each one a river of absence. Her crew clutched their stations, faces pale, as the instruments flickered between static and nothingness. The maw was erasing reality itself, stripping away the fabric of existence. "Hold the line," Kale roared, her voice cutting through the suffocating dread. "We are fire, not fuel." But even her defiance seemed fragile against the enormity of what loomed before them. The maw's first strike, a single tendril lashed outward, striking a dreadnought at the edge of the formation. The ship did not explode, it ceased. One moment it was there, engines burning, weapons primed. The next it was gone, erased from memory and matter alike. The crews of nearby ships screamed as their sensors failed to register the vessel's existence. It was as if it had never been built, never launched, never lived. Kale's knuckles whitened on the controls. "It's rewriting us," she whispered, "unmaking us." The maw's second strike was worse. It pierced through 3 dreadnoughts in a single sweep, their hulls collapsing inward as silence devoured them. The liberated souls scattered, their cries fading into nothingness. Humanity's counterfire. Kale's fleet responded with fury. 10,000 dreadnoughts unleashed their arsenals, railguns, plasma lances, antimatter torpedoes. The void became a storm of fire, each weapon a desperate scream against annihilation. Explosions rippled across the maw's surface, but the shadow absorbed them, swallowing the energy as if it were nourishment. Every shot makes it stronger, Kale realized, horror tightening her chest. Yet the fleet pressed on. Humanity had not come this far to falter. Rin's last transmission on the shattered surface of the construct. Rin lay broken, his body a ruin of light and flesh. The shard was gone, but its resonance lingered within him. His voice, faint and fractured, whispered across the comms. "Kale, listen, it feeds on despair. Don't give it silence, give it noise." Kale's eyes widened. Noise, chaos, resonance. The maw thrived on emptiness, on the absence of sound, of life. To fight it, they needed to overwhelm it with defiance, with the raw cacophony of existence. Hash the chorus of fire. Kale opened the fleet-wide channel. Her voice thundered across 10,000 ships. "Crew of humanity, sing, scream, laugh, cry, make noise, fill the void with life." And they did. Across the dreadnoughts, soldiers shouted battle cries, engineers sang hymns, children aboard refugee vessels screamed their names into the comms. The liberated souls joined them, their voices rising into a chorus of defiance. The void trembled. The maw recoiled, its tendrils faltering under the storm of resonance. Hash the maw's rage, but the shadow was not defeated. It convulsed, its vastness rippling like a sea of darkness. From its core a mouth opened, a maw within the maw, revealing a vortex of oblivion. It inhaled, and entire fleets were dragged toward its center, their engines straining against the pull. Kale's dreadnought shuddered, alarms blaring. "Brace!" she shouted, forcing the ship into a counterthrust. The hull groaned, metal screaming as the gravitational tide threatened to tear it apart. One by one, ships were swallowed, their voices silenced. The chorus faltered. Hash the turning point. Kale's eyes burned with fury. She would not let humanity's fire be extinguished. She rerouted the dreadnought's core, overloading its reactors. The ship's heart became a star, its light piercing the shadow. "Rin," she whispered, "one soul at a time." Her dreadnought surged forward, a blazing spear of defiance. The maw shrieked, its tendrils recoiling as the ship's resonance tore into its core. The fleet followed her lead. Thousands of dreadnoughts ignited their reactors, becoming suns in the void. The battlefield transformed into a storm of burning stars, each one a defiant cry against annihilation. Hash the maw shatters. The chorus reached its crescendo. Humanity's firestorm roared, their voices rising above silence. The maw convulsed, its vastness fracturing under the weight of resonance. Cracks spread across its form, light spilling through the darkness. The shadow screamed, a sound older than galaxies, a death cry that shook the cosmos. And then it shattered. The void erupted in brilliance, the silence torn apart by fire and noise. The liberated souls surged forward, their chains broken forever. Kale's dreadnought drifted, its hull scorched, its crew exhausted. But her voice remained, defiant and unyielding. "We are fire," she whispered, "and fire does not die." The maw was gone, but in its place something deeper stirred. A silence not yet broken, a shadow not yet revealed. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. End of Chapter 9. Would you like me to push Chapter 10 into an even darker escalation, where the true architect behind the maw reveals itself, or keep the focus on humanity's fragile victory and aftermath before the next storm? Chapter 10, the unmaking. The silence after the maw's shatter was not peace. It was the held breath of a universe waiting to scream. Kale's dreadnought, heart of humanity, drifted in the void where the maw had been, its portside hull scarred down to the bare ceramite frame. Half its bridge viewport cracked, spiderweb fractures snaking across the transparent aluminum. The air reeked of burnt insulation, ionized blood, and the sweet, cloying tang of overworked reactor coolant. Her boots stuck to the deck in spots where spilled hydraulic fluid had mixed with the ash of the maw's remnants, tiny glowing embers that fizzed and died when she shifted her weight. The low, thrumming moan of the ship's damaged core vibrated through the soles of her feet, a constant reminder that they were one misfired relay away from joining the debris of the shattered shadow. For 3 full minutes, the bridge was chaos. Crewmen stumbled through smoke, shouting damage reports over the blare of a dozen klaxons, some laughing, some crying, all of them half convinced they'd survived the unthinkable. The tactical display swam with green pings. 9,872 of the 10,000 dreadnoughts that had burst through the hyperspace portal were still operational, 112 destroyed or missing in the initial maw assault, 16 more listing so badly they'd likely have to be scuttled before they made it back to the portal. Casualty estimates were still coming in, but Kale could already feel the weight of the numbers in her bones, the ghost of every voice that had been swallowed by the maw before they'd overloaded their cores. Comms hailing Xylthar orbital defense grid. Jax's voice cracked over the din, the comms officer slumping back in his chair, his uniform smudged with ash, a gash bleeding sluggishly across his forehead. He'd been a kid when they'd picked him up from the mining colonies on Titan, barely 20, but he'd held the frequency through the entire Maw fight, his fingers flying across the console even as the bridge shook hard enough to throw him from his seat twice. They're not responding, just static. Kale's jaw tightened. She'd memorized the Xalthari's hailing frequency, the pulse pattern Rin had taught her, the one that would signal to the crystalline defenders that the human fleet was here to help, not conquer. Rin had spent 6 months living among the Xalthari, learning their language, their technology, the reason the Maw had descended on their world 3 months prior. She'd been the one who'd decoded the distress signal, the one who'd convinced the UN High Command to send the full Dreadnought fleet instead of a single scout ship. "Boost the signal," she ordered, leaning over the tactical console, her eyes scanning the display for any sign of the Xalthari's orbital platforms. They should have been blazing by now, their light cannons charging to target the Maw's tendrils, their crystalline hulls glinting in the faint starlight. Instead, the space around Xylthar's blue-green orb was empty, save for the drifting wreckage of a dozen Xalthari frigates, their shattered hulls glinting like broken glass. Switch to Rin's emergency frequency, the one she programmed before she went down to the core. Jax's fingers flew across the console, and a moment later, a faint, warbling pulse filled the bridge, the exact frequency Rin had used to calibrate the fleet's resonance cannons. Kale's throat tightened. She told the fleet that frequency was a weapon, a way to disrupt the Maw's cohesion. She hadn't told them it was Rin's voice, recorded over and over, layered into the cannon's output, each blast a fragment of her defiance. She never told anyone that Rin had been her partner for 7 years, that they'd built the first human Xalthari research outpost on the planet's northern ice cap, that Rin had been the one to pull her out of the wreckage of their survey craft when the Maw's first tendril had crushed it, that she'd whispered Rin's name when she'd rerouted the heart of humanity's core because she'd known, deep down, that Rin was already gone, swallowed by the shadow before the fight had even begun. The pulse lasted 3 seconds, then cut out. No response, no confirmation, just the empty hum of the void. "Captain," the tactical officer Mara called out, her voice tight. She was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, had commanded a corvette through the Maw's initial assault without losing a single crew member, but now her hands were shaking as she pointed at the display. "Look at the Maw fragments. They're not drifting." Kale's eyes snapped to the display. The thousands of glowing, cinder-like fragments that had been the Maw were no longer tumbling randomly through the void. They were moving, slow, deliberate, converging in a loose, pulsing ring around Xylthar, each fragment glowing in time with the faint, subsonic hum that was now bleeding through the ship's hull, so quiet she'd almost missed it. "Sensors, what's the source of that hum?" Kale barked. "It's coming from Xylthar's core, Captain," the sensor officer replied, his face pale. "Same frequency as the Maw's resonance, but deeper, older. It's getting louder. It's matched the Maw's frequency now." Before Kale could respond, the comms blared again, a burst of raw, unencrypted light that flooded the bridge, so bright half the crew shielded their eyes. The universal translator Rin had installed on every comms console crackled to life, spitting out fragmented, warped words. The Xalthari's light language translated into guttural, desperate audio. "Broken the lock, you did not understand. The Maw was prison, not invader, architect wakes. We tried to warn. Rin is in the core. She holds the seal, but it breaks. Do not fire the resonance. It is food. Turn off your cores." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Kale's blood ran cold. She'd found Rin's research notes 3 days after the distress signal had arrived, hidden in the encrypted partition of her personal datapad. Rin had deciphered the Zalthari's ancient core tablets, the ones that told of a prison built 12,000 years prior, to hold an entity called the Weave Eater, a creature that fed on the resonance of conscious beings, that had almost broken free once before, devouring 3 entire star systems before the Zalthari had trapped it in their planet's core, wrapped it in layers of resonant crystal, and sealed it behind the maw. A field of shadow that looked like an invading force, but was actually the outermost layer of the prison. She told Rin the notes were dangerous, that if the fleet knew the maw was a prison they might hesitate, might not fight with the same ferocity that had won them every battle against the Shadow's tendrils. Rin had laughed, kissed her, and said, "We're not fighting a monster, Kale. We're fighting a lock, and sometimes you have to break a lock to save what's inside." She'd been right about the lock, wrong about what was inside. "Captain," Jax's voice was a whisper, and Kale turned to see him slumped forward in his chair, his forehead resting on the console, his skin pale, almost translucent. His biomonitor on the bridge's overhead display blinked erratically, his heart rate dropping by the second. "I can feel it, pulling, like something siphoning my thoughts. My voice." He lifted his head and Kale's stomach dropped. His eyes were no longer brown. They were glowing faint silver, the same color as the Zalthari's crystalline cores, and his skin was so thin she could see the faint blue veins of his arteries pulsing beneath it, as if something was drinking the life from him from the inside out. "Jax," Kale started, stepping forward, but he was gone before she could reach him. His body didn't fall. It dissolved, turning to fine, glowing silver dust that drifted through the air, settling on the console, on the deck, on Kale's uniform before fizzing out like dying embers. The only proof he'd ever been there was the faint, lingering hum of his voice on the comms and the biomonitor that now read flatline. The bridge erupted into chaos. Crewmen shouted, scrambling back from the console, their eyes wide with terror. Myra was already yelling damage reports, her voice tight with panic. Iron Resolve just went dark. No explosion, no hull breach, just gone. All 400 crew gone. Sensors show no debris, no energy signature, nothing. Vanguard's Wrath is reporting core drain, the sensor officer yelled, his voice cracking. Their reactor output dropped 40% in 30 seconds. No coolant leak, no sabotage, just energy being siphoned out of the core. They're venting plasma to try to stop it, but it's not working. They're asking for permission to abandon ship. Kale ignored the shouts, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The ring of maw fragments around Zalthar had flared bright silver the moment Jax had died, and now a thin beam of dark, iridescent light was pouring out of the planet's core, hitting the Vanguard's Wrath amidships. The Dreadnought's hull didn't explode. It unraveled, the ceramite plates peeling away like burnt paper, the metal turning to glowing silver dust that was pulled into the beam, along with the faint, distant screams of the crew that came over the comms for half a second before cutting out entirely. The Vanguard's Wrath was gone, no trace, no debris, just the beam of dark light pulsing brighter, stronger, as it drank the Dreadnought's energy like water. All ships, fire resonance cannons at the maw fragment ring. Kale roared, her voice cutting through the panic. Divert all auxiliary power to cannons. Do not let that beam hit any more ships. The fleet responded, 9,800 dreadnoughts turning their cannons towards the ring, and a second later, a storm of silver light slammed into the fragments, cracking them, shattering them into smaller pieces that drifted away, dissolving into the void. The beam faltered, dimmed for a second, then flared brighter, and another cruiser, the Starfall, was hit, unraveling in seconds, its crew's screams echoing over the comms before they were silenced. "It's feeding on the resonance," Mara yelled, slamming her fist on the console. "Our cannon fire is just giving it more energy. It's siphoning it right out of the blast." "We're killing ourselves." Kale's blood ran cold. She thought the resonance was the only thing that could hurt the maw. She'd never considered that it might be food for what was inside it. The Weave Eater. The thing the Zalthari had imprisoned for 12,000 years. The thing Rin had tried to hold back. The thing she'd broken the lock for. The comms crackled again, and this time the voice was clear, unmistakable, warm, laced with the quiet, dry humor Kale had loved for 7 years. The voice that had whispered jokes to her in the dark of their survey outpost on Xylthar's northern ice cap. The voice that had held her when the Maw had first attacked, when they'd thought they were going to die, when Rin had pressed a data chip into her hand and said, "If I don't make it, you get this to the fleet. They have to know what the Maw really is." Kale. Rin's voice was faint, strained, like she was speaking through a wall of water, every word laced with pain. "Stop firing, you're feeding it. The resonance cannons, they're the same frequency as the prison's lock. You're breaking the rest of it for it. Turn off your cores, all of them. Now, if you stop feeding it, I can hold the seal for a few more hours, maybe long enough to get the civilians off Xylthar." "Rin," Kale's voice was a ragged whisper, her hand pressed to her mouth to stifle a sob. "Oh my God, Rin, are you—" "No time." Rin's voice was getting weaker, fainter, as if she was fighting to stay conscious. "The architect is almost awake. It's not just the Maw fragments, it's the planet's core. The Xalthari, they didn't just build the prison, they are the prison. Their crystalline bodies, their collective resonance, it's the anchor. The Maw was just the outer layer. When you broke the Maw, you started breaking the anchor. The Xalthari are already fading. Half the capital is gone. The crystalline spires are turning to dust. You have to turn off the cores. If you don't, it'll manifest fully in 10 minutes and it'll eat every living thing in this system, including you, including me." The bridge went silent. Every pair of eyes was on Kale. Turn off the cores and the fleet was dead in the water. No shields, no weapons, no life support for more than an hour, sitting ducks for whatever came out of that core. Keep firing and they'd feed the Weaveater, make it stronger, kill Rin, kill the Xalthari and probably themselves anyway. "Captain," Mara said, her voice low, urgent, as she pulled up a countdown timer on the tactical display. The Weaveater's beam was pulsing faster now, each pulse hitting a different ship, unraveling it in seconds. "The Iron Resolve's escape pods just reported that the beam is tracking moving targets. If we turn off our cores, we can't run. It'll find us. The stealth systems won't hide us from something that feeds on resonance. Our life signs will light it right to us. And if we keep firing, we feed it," Kale said, her voice steady, even as her hands shook. She thought of Rin, trapped in the core, holding back a seal with her own life force, sacrificing everything to give them a chance. She thought of the Xalthari, who had welcomed her and Rin into their homes, who had shared their technology, their art, their songs, who had sent a distress signal not for themselves, but for every living thing in the galaxy that the Weaveater would consume if it broke free. She thought of the 112 dreadnoughts they'd lost in the Maw fight, the crews who'd died screaming, who'd overloaded their cores to buy her the chance to break the Maw, who'd thought they were saving the galaxy. She touched the comms button, her voice ringing across the bridge, across every comms channel in the fleet, loud enough to cut through the panic, loud enough to make every crew member, every captain, every marine frozen in fear look up, listen, obey. All ships stand down from resonance cannon fire. Divert all power to life support and stealth systems. Power down all non-essential systems. Now. Chaos erupted across the fleet. Captains yelled over the comms, arguing, some refusing the order, screaming that they'd rather die fighting than sit and wait to be eaten, some following it, their hulls going dark one by one, their lights dimming as they cut power to everything but the bare minimum to keep their crews alive. Kale watched the tactical display, her heart in her throat as half the fleet powered down, their signatures fading to faint, almost invisible blips, while the other half kept firing, their blasts hitting the Maw fragment ring, shattering more pieces, feeding the Weaveater, making the beam brighter, stronger, faster. The Weaveater let out a roar that wasn't sound, a pulse of dark energy that washed over the entire fleet, knocking out every sensor, every comms, every screen on every ship. The bridge plunged into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the emergency strips along the deck, and the neural link Kale shared with the fleet's command network flared with searing pain, as if 1,000 needles were driving into her skull at once. She cried out, falling to her knees, blood trickling from her nose as the link overloaded, the connections to half the fleet snapping one by one, their signatures vanishing from the display forever. When the screens flickered back on, half the fleet was gone. The dreadnoughts that had kept firing were the first to go, their hulls unraveling in seconds, their crews screaming over the comms before they were silenced, their energy siphoned into the beam, which was now so bright it lit up the entire system, casting long, dark shadows across Xalthar's surface. The Xalthari's capital city, which had been glowing bright silver just minutes before, was now dark, the crystalline spires crumbling, their light fading as the Weaveater fed on their resonance, the last of the Xalthari's life force draining into the beam. Kale's throat tightened as she scanned the display, counting the remaining ships. 4,127 left. Half the fleet gone in 2 seconds because they'd refused to follow the order. Because they'd thought fighting was the only way to win. Then she saw it. A new portal had opened, not the bright blue hyperspace portal they'd burst through to get to Xalthar, but a vast, swirling black vortex, right in front of the Weaveater, its edges crackling with dark energy that made the Maw's shadow look like a child's nightlight. And through it she could see shapes, vast, winged, shadowy things, millions of them pouring through, their forms shifting like smoke given teeth and claws, their eyes glowing the same silver as the Weaveater's beam, their screams silent, soundless as they surged into the system, heading straight for the remaining fleet, straight for Xalthar's dying core. The comms crackled to life again, and Rin's voice was even fainter now, barely a whisper, so quiet Kale had to lean in close to hear it, the words laced with the faint rattle of someone who is seconds from death. Kale, that's the brood. The Weaveater didn't just summon the Maw. The Maw was a beacon. It was calling them. They've been waiting for the prison to break for 12,000 years. They've eaten 100 galaxies. There are billions of them, more coming through the portal every second. Kale stared at the portal, at the millions of creatures pouring through, at the Weaveater, which was almost fully formed now, its vast, shifting body looming over Xalthar, its maw opening wide, a void so deep it seemed to drink the starlight around it, ready to swallow the planet. Then the rest of the galaxy, then everything else in its path. She thought of Rin, trapped in the core, holding back the seal with her own life, her voice fading with every second. She thought of the 4,127 ships left in the fleet, their crews looking to her for orders, for hope, for the same defiance that had let them break the Maw. She thought of the Xalthari, who were almost gone, their civilization being unmade before her eyes, the last of their crystalline spires crumbling into dust, their final song a faint, dying hum on the comms. She touched the comms button, her voice steady, even as her hands shook, even as she felt the weight of the end of the world pressing down on her shoulders, even as the first of the brood ships loomed on the tactical display, their weapons charging. All ships, charge resonance cannons. Divert every last bit of power to weapons, shields, engines. We're not dying today. We're not letting them take Xalthar. We're not letting them take anyone else. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, so quiet only the bridge crew could hear, only Rin, somewhere in the dark of the planet's core, could hear, the same quiet promise she'd made when she'd first overloaded her Dreadnought's core to break the Maw. Hold on, Rin. I'm coming for you. The Weaveater roared, and the first of the brood ships surged forward, weapons blazing, and the heart of humanity surged to meet them, its damaged hull groaning, its core flaring bright, ready to burn. The Weaveater's roar was not sound. It was a physical force, a vibration that raced up the soles of Kale's boots, rattled her teeth until Chapter 12. The last resonance the heart of humanity shuddered as the brood's first salvo struck, a cascade of plasma fire that tore through its outer plating and sent molten fragments spiraling into the void. Kale gripped the command rail, her knuckles white, her eyes locked on the tactical display where thousands of crimson signatures swarmed like locusts across the grid. The Weaveater loomed behind them, its body a shifting tapestry of void and light, its hunger palpable, its roar vibrating through the bones of every living being within range. The fleet answered. Resonance cannons flared. Each shot a spear of harmonic energy that rippled through the brood ships, unraveling their molecular bonds in bursts of incandescent destruction. The void lit up with the fury of humanity's last stand, but for every brood ship that fell, 10 more surged forward, their weapons screaming, their hulls bristling with jagged protrusions that seemed to grow and mutate mid-battle. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. Form Phalanx pattern. Shield the Zalthari spires. Every dreadnought, lock resonance to my signal now. The surviving 4,127 ships shifted formation, their engines burning at maximum, their shields overlapping into a lattice of light that encircled the dying planet. The brood slammed against it, clawing, biting, tearing, their shrieks echoing across comms as interference, as if the creatures themselves were trying to speak through static. The Weave Eater's maw widened and the lattice began to buckle. Then, the impossible happened. The hyperspace portal flared, not with brood ships but with something else, something vast, disciplined, and unmistakably human. One by one, then in waves, dreadnoughts burst through, their hulls gleaming with the burn of fresh transit, their cores blazing like newborn stars. 10,000 ships, 10,000 human dreadnoughts, each bristling with resonance cannons, each carrying the weight of a civilization that had refused extinction. The comms erupted with voices, captains, admirals, soldiers, all speaking at once, their words a chorus of defiance. Kale, we heard your call. We're here. Humanity stands with Zalthar. Let's finish this. Kale's breath caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, the crushing despair lifted, replaced by something fierce, something unbreakable. Hope. The brood faltered. For the first time, their endless tide hesitated, their shrieks rising in confusion as the dreadnoughts aligned, their resonance cannons charging in perfect synchrony. The Weave Eater twisted, its body convulsing, its maw snapping shut as if it sensed the danger, as if it knew what was coming. Kale raised her hand, her voice steady, her heart pounding. All ships fire. The void exploded. 10,000 resonance cannons unleashed in unison, their harmonic waves converging into a single, universe-shaking chord. The brood ships disintegrated by the thousands, their bodies unraveling into dust, their shrieks cut short. The Weave Eater convulsed, its vast form rippling, its tendrils snapping, its maw collapsing inward as the resonance tore through its essence, unraveling the prison that had held it together for millennia. The planet shook. Deep within Zalthar's core, Rin's voice flared bright across the comms, stronger than it had been in hours. Kale, you did it. The seal is breaking. The brood, they're unraveling, but the core, it's collapsing. If I let go, Zalthar dies. If I hold on, I die. Kale's chest tightened. She closed her eyes, her hand trembling over the comms. Rin, hold on, just a little longer. We'll stabilize the core. I swear it. But even as she spoke, the tactical display showed the truth. The planet's core was fracturing, its energy bleeding into the void. The resonance had saved the galaxy, but it had doomed Zalthar. The choice was clear, brutal, and immediate. Kale opened her eyes, her voice breaking but resolute. All ships divert power to planetary stabilizers. Every ounce of energy you have. We're not losing her. Not today. The dreadnoughts obeyed. Energy beams lanced from orbit, converging on the planet's core, weaving a lattice of stabilizing resonance around it. The ground trembled, the spires cracked, but the core held, barely. Rin's voice whispered one last time, soft, fading, but filled with peace. Kale, thank you for everything. Then silence. The core stabilized. The brood was gone. The Weave Eater was no more. Zalthar lived, scarred but alive. Humanity had stood at the edge of annihilation and refused to fall. 10,000 dreadnoughts drifted in orbit, their hulls battered, their crews exhausted, but their spirits unbroken. Kale stood on the bridge, her eyes on the planet below, her heart heavy with loss but burning with defiance. This isn't the end, she whispered. It's the beginning. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy listened.